The twin suns of Valara Prime hung high in the red sky as a crowd gathered in the great arena of the Velar Dominion. Warriors from across the stars stood in a wide circle, their shining armor reflecting the harsh light. Flags of different clans waved in the hot wind. The air buzzed with loud voices, cheers, and laughter. At the center stood Darien Holt, the only human in the gathering. He looked plain among the tall, sharp-featured Velar warriors. His armor was simple-load, scratched, nothing like the shining battlesuits of the Velar. His sword, tied on his back, looked dull and worn. Across from him stood Commander Vela, daughter of the Velar High Warlord. She was tall, her dark eyes sharp like twin blades. Her golden armor gleamed under the sun. Around her the Velar champions laughed loudly. Vela folded her arms and walked toward Darien with a slow, proud step. She smiled, but her words were sharp. "So this is the human they call a warrior?" she said, loud enough for all to hear. "I thought humans were weak, but this one looks even weaker." The crowd burst into fresh laughter. Darien said nothing. Vela circled him, her smile growing wider. "Where did you find that armor?" "Scrapyard," she mocked. Her soldiers laughed harder. Some pointed at Darien's dented chest plate. Others joked in their sharp, Velard tongue. Darien stood silent. His face showed no anger, no pride, just a calm look in his eyes. Vela walked closer, her voice dropping low. "Perhaps you should take off that rusty armor before it falls apart on its own." For a moment the arena went quiet. Darien moved, slowly. Without a word, he reached up and unclipped his chest plate. The metal armor fell to the ground with a soft thud. Dust rose around his boots. The crowd blinked in surprise. The laughter faded. He took off his shoulder guards and dropped them beside the chest plate. Next, he pulled off the arm guards and belt. One by one, each piece of armor fell to the ground. No one spoke. Even Vela stood still, her smile fading. Now Darien stood wearing only a simple tunic and trousers, skin pale compared to the sun-dark. Velar showed marks of old scars, but his face stayed calm. He met Vela's eyes. Then without a word he turned around and walked away. The warriors stared. No one stopped him. For a long moment Vela said nothing. She watched as Darien walked out of the circle, his steps steady, his head held high. She felt something strange. Why did her heart beat faster? Why wasn't she laughing? Later that day in the command tent, Vela sat alone. The sounds of the camp outside seemed far away. She played the scene again in her mind. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He didn't even look angry. He simply walked away. Why? Velar warriors prized honor in battle. They fought for pride. Challenged others to show strength. But that human had done none of those things. And yet, he didn't seem weak at all. Was it shame? No. She knew what shame looked like. Was it fear? No. His eyes were not the eyes of a man afraid. It was something else? Vela frowned. She didn't like feeling confused. She was a commander, a leader, a warrior. She had won battles in 3 systems. She had made enemies kneel. But today, in front of a human, she felt unsure. In a nearby tent, some Velar soldiers whispered among themselves. "Did you see his eyes?" One said. "He didn't flinch," said another. "Maybe humans are not as weak as we thought." The whispers spread like wind through the camp, far from the camp. Darien walked into the open wastelands. The ground was cracked and dry. The wind was sharp and dry against his face. He walked with steady steps, his armor left behind. He remembered. The sky over Valara Prime turned soft and golden as evening fell. The laughter from the arena still echoed in the air. The Velar warriors celebrated, sharing stories about how they had mocked the human who dared to stand among them. But Commander Vela did not laugh. Instead, she sat in her tent, staring at the ground. Her hands rested on her knees, her sharp eyes fixed on nothing. Why couldn't she stop thinking about him? Why couldn't she forget the way Darien Holt had removed his armor, without a word, and walked away? calm, steady, unafraid. Is it pride? Was it anger? No, it was something deeper, a question she couldn't answer. What kind of warrior gives up his armor and leaves without fighting back? That night, Vela couldn't sleep. The moon rose over the camp as shadows moved quietly under the sky. Vela slipped out of her tent. She wore no armor, only a light cloak over her clothes. Her heart beat fast, but not with fear. She followed the path Darien had taken. At first, she told herself it was curiosity. She wanted to see where he had gone. Maybe he had run away, like a coward. But deep inside, another voice spoke, a voice she couldn't ignore. What if he hadn't run? What if he had done something unexpected? Vela moved through the rocky paths outside the camp. Soon, she saw a soft light ahead. She stopped and hid behind a large stone in the soft glow of a small fire. She saw Darien Holt. He sat on a flat rock beside the flames. But he wasn't alone. A group of villagers sat around him, men, women, and children. Their clothes were torn, some had small wounds. They looked weak, tired, hungry. Dara gave a young boy a piece of bread. He wrapped a cloth around a woman's arm. He spoke softly, his face calm. Vela stared in silence. This was not what she expected. Why was a warrior sitting with villagers? Why was he feeding them? For a long moment, Vela watched from the shadows. She saw Darien help an old man stand. She watched him carry water to a child. She heard him say words of hope, soft, simple words that warmed even her heart. He didn't act like a soldier. He didn't act like a man seeking glory. He simply helped. Vela felt a strange tightness in her chest. What was this human doing? Did his actions feel stronger than any sword? She shook her head. This was foolishness. Surely he was only trying to win favor. But then she saw something that froze her heart. One of the villagers, an older woman, took Darien's hand in both of hers. She bowed her head and whispered something. Darien smiled gently and placed his hand over hers. He wasn't looking for thanks. He wasn't asking for reward. He was just being kind. Vela stepped back, her heart beating fast. Why did this bother her? Why did she feel ashamed? She, a proud Velar warrior, had spent years chasing honor, fighting for pride, seeking glory on the battlefield, but this human had found something greater in helping strangers, in showing simple kindness. Vela turned and walked back toward the camp. Her steps were quick, but her thoughts moved slower. She couldn't forget what she had seen. Later, in her tent, Vela sat on the edge of her bed. The laughter of the Velar soldiers echoed outside. They still told stories of how they mocked the human, but Vela stayed silent. She couldn't laugh. Not anymore. That night she whispered to herself, "Perhaps he is stronger than we know." But even as she said the words, she felt the weight of a question in her heart, one she could not answer. What truly makes a warrior strong? The next morning, the sun rose over the rocky hills of Valara Prime. Its sharp light cut through the thin clouds, as if warning the world of a hard day ahead. Commander Vela stood at the edge of the Velar camp, staring toward the wastelands. Night before, she had watched Darien walk away. She had thought she wouldn't care. But now, she couldn't forget him. Why had a simple human, mocked by everyone, left such a strong feeling in her heart? She shook her head. She was a Velar warrior. She didn't have time for such foolish thoughts. Today, she would end this strange curiosity. Vela found Darien near a small stream outside the camp. He was kneeling beside a wounded old man, a local villager caught between two fighting armies. The man's arm was bleeding. Dora stripped from his own tunic and wrapped the wound gently. His hands moved with care, but his face stayed calm and serious. Vela stood in silence behind a tree, watching him. She had followed him without telling anyone. She had expected to see him hiding or running away, or maybe crying in shame. But this, he wasn't running, he wasn't hiding, he was helping a stranger. Even Velar warriors rarely did that, especially not for weak villagers. Vela stepped out from behind the tree. You came here to heal villagers? She called out. Her voice was sharp, but not cruel. Darian looked up, nodded once. Someone had to. Vela walked closer, folding her arms. You are a soldier, a warrior. This is not your duty. Darian stood up. His eyes met hers. Armor is a weight when you carry the world instead, he said. His words were simple, yet they hit Vela harder than any sword. She tried to laugh, but it sounded weak even to her ears. You speak as if you know better than us. I don't, Darian said quietly. I just know better than myself. For a moment, Vela didn't know what to say. This human spoke in a way no Velar warrior did. Vela's pride burned inside her. She couldn't let this man confuse her heart and mind. She crossed her arms and gave him a cold look. Fine, she said. Then let us see how strong your human ways truly are. Darian didn't blink. What do you mean? I challenge you, Vela said, her voice firm. Survive one night in the Dead Canyons. Go there alone. No armor, no sword. If you are truly strong, prove it. The Dead Canyons were a place of danger. Wild creatures, sharp rocks, poison winds. Even Velar's soldiers feared to go there alone. Darian looked at the rising sun, then back at her. I accept, he said with a slight smile. Vela raised her chin. You will leave now. Return by sunrise tomorrow, if you can. She turned and walked away before he could answer. Her heart beat fast with anger. But something else. That evening, Vela sat in her tent. She tried to read her war plans, but her eyes kept drifting to the door. The sun had begun to set. A sandstorm was rising in the west, she wondered. Had she sent Darian to his death? For some reason, the thought did not make her feel proud. It made her chest feel tight. Outside, the camp was quiet. The Velar soldiers had heard of Vela's challenge. Some whispered that the human would not survive. Others said he was a fool. No one believed he would return, but Vela. She wasn't sure anymore. As the night darkened, wind howled across the rocks. Dust clouds moved like shadows. In the Dead Canyons, wild beasts growled in the distance. The sharp wind carried the sound of claws scraping on stone. Darian moved through the canyons with steady steps. His simple tunic flapped in the wind. His eyes stayed calm, watching the dark shapes around him. A shadow moved beside him, a wild canyon beast with glowing eyes. Darian picked up a stone and tossed it toward the beast. The beast sniffed, growled, and walked away. He kept walking. When the poison wind came, he covered his mouth with a cloth. He moved slowly, resting when the storm grew strong. He knew fear, but he didn't let it hold him. He had faced worse than this, in other worlds, in darker places, and more than that, he had a promise to keep. Back in the camp, Vela stood at the edge of the walls. She stared into the dark horizon. The wind tugged at her hair. Why am I waiting? She whispered. To herself, she didn't know. But deep inside, she wanted him to return. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft gold. The Velar camp stirred to life. Warriors stepped out of their tents, expecting news, perhaps a scout's report of the human's body found in the Dead Canyons. Commander Vela stood at the camp gate, her arms crossed tightly. She had not slept all night. Her eyes had stayed fixed on the horizon. Her heart told her two things, and they pulled in opposite ways. One part of her believed Darian could not survive. The other part hoped he would. A sharp voice broke the morning air. Look, a soldier shouted, pointing toward the east. Vela's eyes snapped to the rising sun. A figure walked out of the dusty haze. Step by step, steady, calm. It was Darian. Halt! He carried a small child in his arms, a girl with dark hair and thin arms. Her face was tired but safe. Behind them, the wind chased their footprints, erasing them in the sand. Vela felt something tighten in her chest. He came back, and he did not come back alone. The camp gathered quickly. Warriors whispered in disbelief. He survived the Dead Canyons and brought back a child? Possible. But their eyes saw the truth. Darien stopped at the gate. He placed the child gently on the ground beside him. The girl held his hand tightly. Vela stepped forward. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice was softer than usual. Darien looked at her, his calm eyes meeting hers. "I found her lost. In the canyon, raiders had left her behind. She was too weak to walk far. I couldn't leave her there." Vela stared at the small girl. No warrior had ever returned from the dead canyons with a survivor. Most had not returned at all. "You risked your life for this?" she asked. Darien gave a simple nod. "For her life, yes." The camp fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. One of Vela's lieutenants stepped forward. His name was Roken, a tall, harsh Velar, known for his cold heart. "This is foolishness," Roken said sharply. "A true warrior does not waste strength on the weak." Darien looked at him, his face calm. "Then maybe you should ask, who is really weak?" Roken frowned, his hand moving toward his sword. But Vela lifted her hand quickly. "Enough," she said. Her voice was sharp this time. Roken stepped back, his eyes narrowing. Vela turned to Darien again. "You passed the test. You survived. And you brought back a life." She paused, her words tasting strange on her tongue. "You have earned my respect." For a moment, Darien's eyes softened, gave a slight nod. "I didn't come here for respect, but thank you." Later that morning, as the camp settled down, Vela stood alone by the training field. She watched Darien in the distance, sitting beside the rescued child. He gave her a piece of bread and water, speaking to her. In a gentle voice, Vela could not stop watching him. Why did this human, who should have been her enemy, act like this? Why did her heart feel lighter when she saw him? That afternoon, news of Darien's return spread across the Velar lands. Warriors spoke of the human who survived the dead canyons and brought back a child. Some called him foolish, him brave. But many began to wonder, were humans really as weak as they believed? Vela met Darien again that evening. This time there were no soldiers watching, no mocking crowd. It's only the soft wind between them. "I still don't understand." "You," Vela said quietly. Darien smiled slightly. "You don't have to." Vela shook her head. "I want to." Oh. Darien's eyes met hers. "I'm not your enemy, Vela. I came here not to fight, but because I believe even enemies can learn from each other." Vela felt her heart beat faster. She was a Velar commander, trained to see humans as weak. But now, she saw him differently, not as a weak human, not even as a warrior, but as something more. The sun set behind them. The sky turned to soft red. Vela stood beside Darien, not as a commander, but as an equal, and for the first time, she wondered if perhaps peace was possible. The next morning, dark clouds hung low over the Velar camp. A messenger arrived at dawn, bringing a sealed order from the Velar High Command. Commander Vela read the message in her tent. Her eyes moved slowly over each word. The order was simple but sharp like a blade. "The human called Darien Holt is a danger to Velar honor. Arrest him at once. Bring him in chains before the High Command." Vela's hand tightened around the message. They called him a danger to honor? She folded the letter slowly and placed it on the table. Outside, her soldiers waited. They had heard of the order. Some whispered in excitement. Others smiled darkly, hoping to see the human chained like a prisoner. Vela closed her eyes. Darien had shown kindness, something more than any Velar warrior she had met, but the High Command saw only a threat, and now they expected her to lead the capture. Vela walked out of her tent. Her lieutenants stood in a line, armor shining, swords at their sides. Roken stepped forward. "Your orders, Commander?" Vela's face stayed calm. "We move at once," she said. "Find Darien. Bring him to my unharmed." Roken frowned. "Unharmed?" Vela met his eyes. "Yes, that is my order." Roken gave a slow, sharp smile. "As you wish." But as he turned away, Vela saw the look in his eyes, a look she did not trust. Darien stood by the old well near the edge of the camp, speaking with the same little girl he had rescued. He gave her a small carved figure made from wood. The girl smiled brightly. Vela walked toward him, her heart heavy. "Darien," she said softly. He turned, nodding. "Vela." She looked around. Soldiers were watching them from a distance. Some had their hands on their weapons. Vela stepped closer, her voice low. "They've ordered me to take you in." Darien did not look surprised. "I expected it." Vela frowned. "Then why didn't you run?" Darien met her eyes. "Gulls. Running means I have something to hide." "I don't." For a moment, they stood in silence. Vela felt a sharp pain in her chest. She didn't want this, but before she could speak again, a loud shout broke the air. "Take him!" Rokan and a group of armed soldiers rushed forward. Vela spun around. "Stand down," she ordered. But they didn't listen. Rokan drew his sword. His eyes burned with anger. The High Command gave the order. This human must be chained now. Darien stood still, his hands open. "I won't fight you," he said calmly. The little girl clung to his leg, her eyes wide with fear. Vela stepped between them. "You will not touch him," she said sharply. Rokan narrowed his eyes. "Commander, are you disobeying the High Command?" Vela met his stare. "I am following what is right." The soldiers behind Rokan hesitated. Some lowered their weapons slightly. But Rokan growled. "Traitor!" He raised his sword and charged in one swift move. Vela drew her own sword and blocked Rokan's strike. Steel clashed with steel. The crowd gasped. Vela pushed him back, her voice ringing across the field. "This is not the Velar way. We do not attack the ones who show mercy." Rokan shouted in rage, swinging again. But this time other soldiers stepped between them. One of them, younger warrior named Kellen, spoke loudly. "She's right. The human saved a life." He showed honor. More soldiers nodded. Rhokan looked around, his anger turning to shock. Slowly, his sword lowered. Vela turned to Darien. "You are under my protection," she said. Darien gave a small nod. "And you have my trust." For a moment they stood together, not as human and alien, but as warriors who understood each other. That evening, Rokan left the camp in shame. Vela gathered her loyal soldiers and told them the truth. She spoke of Darien's courage, his actions, and the hope for peace. Many listened. Some doubted. But none walked away. News spread quickly. The story of the human who survived the dead canyons. The human who saved a child. And the Velar commander who stood by his side. It became more than a story. It became a spark. But Valen knew this was only the beginning. The High Command would not forgive betrayal so easily, and soon. They would come for both of them. The air in the Velar camp grew heavy with tension. News had reached every corner. Commander Vela had refused to arrest the human. Some called it bravery. Others called it betrayal. But Vela stood firm. At sunrise, she met with her soldiers in the center of the camp. Many had stayed loyal to her. Some had changed their hearts after seeing Darien's actions. She stood before them, her sword at her side, her voice steady. "I did not turn against the Velar," she said. "I stood for what is right. If that makes me a traitor, so be it." No one spoke. The wind carried her words through the camp. Behind her, Darien stood quietly, his hands folded, the little girl standing close beside him by midday. The sound of engines filled the sky. A line of black ships appeared on the horizon marked. With the seal of the Velar High Command, they landed just outside the camp. Soldiers poured out in perfect lines. Their armor shone like dark glass. At the front stood Lord Commander Kale, a man known for his iron will. His face was cold, his eyes sharp. Vela walked out to meet him, her soldiers behind her. Kale's voice was loud and clear. "Commander Vela, you stand accused of treason." Vela met his eyes without fear. "I stand for honor." Kale pointed at Darien. "And you, human, have no place in Velar lands. You will be taken in chains. Darien said nothing. Kale turned to the soldiers. Arrest them both. But something happened Kale did not expect. The soldiers did not move. Some shifted uneasily. Others looked at each other. Vela's loyal warriors stepped forward. Standing beside Darien, even soldiers from Kale's own army hesitated. A young Velar captain lowered his weapon. "My lord, this man saved a child." He showed honor beyond. "Ours." Another voice spoke from the crowd. "We follow true strength, not fear." Kale's face darkened. "You will all regret this." But Vela stepped forward. "No, it is you who will regret turning against your people's heart." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kale gave a sharp hand signal. But instead of charging, many soldiers stepped back. They dropped their weapons. Kale stood alone. His power broke not by battle, but by choice. Vela turned to Darien. "You said, once, armor is a weight when you carry the world instead." Darien smiled slightly. "And you proved it, Vela." Kale left with a handful of loyal guards. His defeat was silent but clear. The Velar warriors cheered not for a victory in battle, but for a victory of honor in the days that followed. The story of Vela and the human warrior spread across the galaxy. They called it the day the warrior walked away, the human who laid down his armor, the Velar commander who chose what was right, and the soldiers who followed their hearts instead of blind orders. It became a story told in every camp, every ship, every home. Vela and Darien stood side by side at the edge of the Vela lands. The wind blew softly across the hills. Vela looked at him. "What will you do now?" Darien looked toward the horizon. "Keep walking. There are others who need help, who need to believe there's another way." Vela smiled. "Then, maybe I'll walk with you." Darien met her eyes. "Maybe we'll walk together." And without a word, they stepped forward side by side. They did not need armor. They did not need weapons. They only needed each other and the strength to do what was right.